The main event of this pay-per-view reinforced a particular wrestling cliche, personal issues draw money, and my oh my, what a personal issue that main event had. I'm John Renton with the Retro Review of WWE SummerSlam 1992 in London, England at Wembley Stadium. 80,355 fans going insane. Of course, I always do quotations because WWE would obviously never lie about their attendance figures. 93,173 people in the Silverdome, sure. Of course, Vince. That being said, a lot of fucking people were there to watch a card that was certainly layered. The good stuff still holds up. Then there's some stuff that cools people down. And then there's some stuff where you think, wow, that seemed like a good idea on paper, but it didn't work. And then a couple other moments were like, whoo, boy. And with more stories coming out from Dark Side of the Ring and shoot interviews, it kind of paints some of the matches in a bit of a weird light. That being said, let's all dive into it, but let me know your thoughts on this show in the comments, please. This did happen in August of 92, and normally SummerSlam happens in the month of August, but that's not the case this year. It's happening at the end of July, so if you happen to be watching this in the future, I hope you're enjoying your flying cars, your teleporters, and whatever the fuck. So anyway, let's talk about a pretty goddamn loud event. It was an open-air stadium. At that point, it was like almost 70 years old. It got torn down about 10 years later, but nevertheless, I mean, a lot of rich history and passionate wrestling fans in the UK, and they were certainly up. They were certainly electric. And the main event, Bret the Hitman Hart against the late great British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith. I'll talk more about that, and also you can hear my thoughts on that match and other Bret Hart matches by checking out the review I did on his biography that WWE and A&E partnered up on that they released last year. So, sponsored by IcoPro. You gotta want it. God, IcoPro advertisements all over this goddamn show. Dark matches include Jim Duggan and the Bushwhackers against the Mountie and the Nasty Boys, and Papa Shango versus Tito Santana. Fun fact, Tito Santana versus Papa Shango happened in the dark match of Mania 9. Had that match made the air, Tito Santana would have had the honor of being on the first 9 WrestleManias, and it would have been kind of a cool honor for him. That being said, because he left the company soon after that, because he was El Matador Tito Santana. That wasn't offensive at all. Opens with the UK fans being loud. Who will win? Who will lose? Will they stay? Will they go? And then we have the pomp and circumstance and all that, and Vince McMahon welcomes us, and Bobby Heenan's in a giant crown, years before Billie Eilish ever wanted us to see her in a crown. And Sir Bobby, the King of England. And LOD makes their entrance. The dummy's driving the bike. And it is, of course, Hawk and Animal with Paul Ellering and Rocco, the fucking goddamn dummy, against Money Inc. with Jimmy Hart. So, the Dark Side of the Ring episode delved a little bit into this, where Hawk was really messed up. And he clearly couldn't do anything at all. He was just absolutely messed up. Apparently it was supposed to be LOD versus the Natural Disasters for the tag titles, but that got mixed up, because, well, Hawk was so messed up, they couldn't trust him. Like, Animal is stout. He could do some stuff, but good God, he could only do so much, and Hawk just basically dumbed himself out of position, as Ernie Ladd once said about King Kong Bundy in Mid-South Wrestling. So the crowd was into it, and we got a power slam 1, 2, 3, but my God, look at Hawk's behavior here. He was out. He didn't have a clue where the hell he was, and he would leave the company right after and not be back in WWE for 5 years. He would go to Japan, team up with Kensuke Sasaki against various people and call him Power Warrior, and Animal would do his stuff, and then they would reunite in WCW and later in WWE, and unfortunately Hawk's no longer with us. He died clean. Just a shame his party lifestyle basically took hold. And then Mean Gene is with Ric Flair. He's going to be watching the main event. Well, what would have been the main event had it not been for Bulldog and Bret. But the big WWF championship match. Randy Savage versus the Ultimate Warrior. Whose side will Mr. Perfect be on? The side of the winner. The side of the person that is going to basically screw over the other. And then we find out that was a whole bunch of just shenanigans. We were flim-flam, bamboozled. Mean Gene was fired up like only he could be. Not like at SummerSlam 1989. Fuck it. It was so great. Sean Mooney is with Virgil talking about nails. And Virgil says he's too legit to quit because that's when MC Hammer had a singing career. If you want to call it a singing career. Nails versus Virgil. Everybody said, what? Why? This is right after Nails had made his debut, beaten up the Big Boss Man, and then he beat Virgil in like 4 minutes with a Cobra Clutch sleeper variation, and then had the Bossman's nightstick and choked out Vincent. A hate crime in the UK, news at 11. The Nails gimmick was absolute shit. He wasn't very... It's funny to see, actually, before he became Nails, the bad Kevin Kelly in wrestling, that he was on some AWA shows and was just fucking hilarious. So anyway, Lord Alfred Hayes is outside of Savage's locker room, and the door's locked, but he will persevere and go places that he's not meant to go. Such was the life of Lord Alfred Hayes. If you know, you know. Mean James with Sherry, who's talking about Michaels and Martel. They have agreed not to hit each other in the face, and Sherry gets what she wants, and there you go. And Sherry is sorely missed. Shawn Michaels with Sensational Sherry versus Rick Martel. The match was well worked. It was all about don't hit each other in the face. That was pretty much it. And Sherry would go nuts whenever it looked like they were going to. And eventually she passed out on the apron. They both got counted out. Shawn and Martel did. They each took turns trying to carry Sherry to the back. And then Martel got a bucket and dumped it on Sherry and woke her up. And oh my God, Sherry got all wet with perspiration and also whatever was in the bucket. And there you go. That's basically what happened with the match there. And then that wasn't the only fuck finish that we got a little bit later. Nasty Boys are all fired up. They're laughing about Sherry getting treated badly, and they won a tag title shot. And Jimmy Hart's managing them, but Money Inc. is going to get the title shot. But yeah, you'll get a title shot at some point. The Nasty Boys will be gone sometime in 93. And then the Natural Disasters against the Beverly Brothers. This is a tag title match, and it certainly happened. There was a miscommunication that led to Typhoon getting beat down for a while. And then we got a Hot Tag Earthquake. He hit the big one, 1, 2, 3. And then they tossed the Genius out there. Fucking Lanny Poffo, good lord. It wasn't much of a match. This was like more of the cool down portion of it. And then we got more cool down after the Bushwhackers cut a promo. And they were talking about staying on the throne and everything. Which it sounded like they were about to with how much they were straining. Lord Alfred Hayes tries to go in the Warriors locker room. And Warriors yells, queering doesn't make the world work. I kid, I kid. Except he actually did say that years later and shut the door. And then Crush versus Repo Man. Crush wins with the Kona Crush or the Head Crush, or whatever the fuck you call it, in about 6 minutes. Ico Pro, you gotta want it. And then Mean Gene's backstage pitches to a video package on the build to the Savage Warrior title match. And the taped programming they had, Superstars, Wrestling Challenge, that kind of stuff, because this was the year before WWE Raw would be a thing. Warrior gets a big pop, so does Savage. They built this up like crazy. Perfect wasn't in the corner of anybody. He didn't appear until later. Savage versus Warrior, WWE Championship match. By the way, once again, fuck the Ultimate Warrior. I'm glad he's dead. Fucking deserved, every goddamn bit of ridicule and heartache, literally, that he fucking got for being the piece of shit he was. That being said, he was over. This is certainly a weird match. Like, who will turn heel? Who will side with Perfect? Turns out nobody would. It was actually just all a ruse. Savage was a magician. He was not God. So he was not a god, he was not any kind of god, he was not any kind of deity. As great as Savage was, so he could only get so much out of Warrior. Warrior was gassed so much during this. He had lost some muscle mass, so you would have thought his cardio couldn't have gotten any worse. Warrior was very much his gimmick where he could smash people and beat them up, and the best match that Warrior had of his career, maybe you could count the Hogan match at Mania 6, was against Savage, at Mania 7. But it was also paced well. This went 30 minutes and quite frankly should have gone 18. Actually, it was like 20 minutes, 40 seconds. It should have gone 10 minutes less. I understand why they gave it a lot of time. It did have a lot of hype. And they really wanted to milk this whole thing of Warrior possibly turning heel. Apparently, the offer was there, but he didn't want to. This was, of course, a year after he had become a legend in his own mind and held Vince up for $500,000, even though he didn't fucking deserve it. Like, why did he deserve it? Why? Because he wanted to be a goddamn man-child and cheat on his wife and everything, and then get with a goddamn stupid woman like Dana Warrior. But nevertheless, this shouldn't have been 30 minutes. It was well worked at times because Savage is just that much of a genius as far as what he can do. But even then, he could only do so much because Savage was on the downside of his full-time in-ring career. Even though he would go to WCW in late 94 and have a resurgence to an extent. They did do Warrior at times was there for stuff early on, but then got gassed like crazy. Savage hurt his knee a couple times during this match and then really hurt it later in the match. It was Warrior, no, it was Savage. Who the fuck screwed over who? Warrior, the referee got bumped, and then Warrior got KO'd with some brass knucks, and then a sky elbow, but the referee was out of it. Warrior tries to go for, his finish. That doesn't work. That gets messy. Savage says, fuck it. I'm going to go and attack Flair. But then he gets hit with the chair from Flair, and then gets counted out. Warrior stops the beatdown. Flair would win the title about a week later, or a few days later, actually, if I think about it, with how the time winds up, or gets, lined up. And then Warrior would end up celebrating with him and show respect. Okay, that's not the worst thing in the world. You could have a show respect there, but good fucking grief. A 30-minute Warrior match when he really could never work past 10. Yeah, the Hogan, I just will not hear that Warrior was like the best. You guys can think that if you want, but he was very much an enigma for a brief moment in time. That's it. That's all he was. And it was a well-worked match for about 35 to 40% of it, but then it just kept going and 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 kept going. Like fucking hell. And then Mean Gene's talking to Flair and Perfect. Well, plan A didn't work. Let's go to plan B. If Flair had plan B, he'd have a few less kids. Just saying. Especially a few less kids he doesn't know about. Wonder how many women Flair exposed himself to on that overseas flight. Then Taker took on Kamala. If this was 1984 or 85 Kamala, that might have been something. But not this Kamala. Not this Taker either. Because Taker was still trying to find his footing and everything. And Kim Chi interferes after a few minutes. Then we get a DQ. And then we get Kamala beating him down and hits a top rope splash where he basically lands with his knees, which he doesn't want to land with all his weight on Taker, so it was safe, but probably killed his goddamn knees. Of course, that's when Kamala has legs under him. But Taker sits up to a big pop and storms to the back. He's gradually gaining weight, Chief. And then Sean Mooney's with the British Bulldog on the main event. And British Bulldog by this point had been up for about 2 days and forgotten all the stuff that Bret Hart had explained to him. And then Mean Gene talks to Bret, where he says he wants the big fight. He's got the big fight, but he's not man enough. My sister's there. He may be married to my sister, but I'm going to hold on to the championship. And then Piper shows up to play bagpipes with the Highlanders, but there can only be one. You lied to me. You fucking lied to me. There were like 18 Highlander movies and TV shows if you put the timeline together. Dark match that was cut, by the way, was Tatanka versus Berserker. Oh no. I feel bad having to miss out on that. So Bulldog comes out with Lennox Lewis that at one point, Heenan says Sherry Lewis. No, I'm kidding. Then says, I think the fight was going to be Razor Ruddock versus Lennox Lewis. And Heenan says at one point, Razor Ramon is going to fight Lennox Lewis. Because Heenan just could needle anybody. God damn, Heenan was great. Bret gets a pop. Bret gets more boos. But, he still got quite a few cheers. He was obviously going to get some boos because Bulldog was a hometown guy, but Bret had his international fans. Huge amount of international fans. Diana was watching on. And, Diana was also watching on about 5 years later in the UK, and then she went to France. And, man, that was the second biggest wreck that we've had in France in many, many years. Almost as big of a wreck as any kind of Luc Besson personal relationships. If you know, you know. Let's get back to this off of that segue. Diana's nervous. She's upset. She's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I love my husband. I love my brother. Bulldog versus Bret, Intercontinental Championship match. It was fucking tremendous. There's really nothing you can say about this match that hasn't been said already. Bret had to talk a whole lot through the match because Bulldog forgot the goddamn spots because he was up on a drug and, alcohol binge for 2 fucking days. But, even though Bulldog was there for everything, and Bret did a lot for him, and Bulldog at one point, though, when he tried to crotch Bret on the top rope, he missed it, and Bret just spun on the goddamn second round. Ooh, that was rough. Great technical masterpiece. Got personal a little bit later, slaps, and viciousness on the mat. Some really, really good stuff here. They understood how to pace this match. This is the match, in my opinion, should have gone 30 minutes. It went about 25, but this could have gone longer. But then again, given how messed up Bulldog was, they might have had to have cut a few minutes off. The crowd was super into this. I mean, they were cheering. They were booing Brett, but they were cheering Bulldog. They were booing Brett, but cheering him. But they were really cheering Bulldog. And the crowd was also split in the WWE Championship match. They weren't as split here. We get a nice, power slam for 2. That's Bulldog's finish, but he didn't hook the leg. And then we get a nice German suplex from Brett for 2. We get a big superplex spot for 2. And the sharpshooter, but Bulldog manages to get to the ropes. And then we get the sunset flip attempt, but Bulldog sits down, covers 1, 2, 3, new champion, huge pop. There we go. Even though it was an open-air stadium, big reactions here. This was really, really good shit. I really goddamn enjoyed this. Diana was there, and we just had a great goddamn family celebration reunion. Brett would go on to win the WWF Championship a couple months later, or about actually 6 weeks later, 7 weeks later. And Bulldog, unfortunately, would only hold the championship for just over 2 months before losing it on Saturday night's main event, because him and Warrior were getting HGH or roids or something from a doctor. They got arrested. Good fucking job there. But anyway, that was a hell of a goddamn way to close the show. It was a layered card, layered with some good and layered with some bullshit. That being said, almost 30 years later, that main event and a couple other things do still hold up. Agree, disagree, what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.